For 2 months, Kobani has been fighting for its life. Surrounded, withstanding wave after wave of ISIS attacks. We managed to get inside and found a city devastated but refusing to surrender. These Kurdish fighters, women and men, are outgunned and outnumbered. 34-year-old Azima is a top field commander. Her name means strength. Now we run, she says. Sheets hung across intersections cloak our movements from enemy snipers. You stay low and run fast. Azima took us to the southern front. As Kurdish women, she says, we are tied to our land and our principles more than our lives. We follow her to Kobani City Hall, now a frontline position. The enemy is just 20 yards away.
She's saying when they come, the ISIS fighters come in waves, not just 1 or 2 that try and infiltrate, but 40, 50 fighters will come and try and swarm into the building.
To keep them back, the Kurds of Kobani mostly have light weapons and grenades. They are like no other fighting group in Syria, secular nationalists with a classless, communal lifestyle. No ranks, everyone part of the war effort. Most women have one home, one family to care for. Not us. We care for our nation, Azima says. Half of Kobani has fallen to ISIS. Its defenders are trying to claw it back.
Kobani has been paying a heavy price for its resistance. This is what's left of Main Street. There are no people here, and if I took just 2 steps in that direction, there's a danger of being shot by a sniper.
The Kurds are backed by U.S. airstrikes. But these are the men and women on the ground facing an enemy known for its savagery. So everyone here carries a weapon of last resort. They'll commit suicide rather than be captured by ISIS. 19-year-old Barfin, a teacher, keeps a grenade in her pocket. I'm not leaving here. Either I die here or we win, she says. It's that total dedication that has kept the defenders of Kobani going and this city alive so far.
I was struck by that dedication of the fighters in Kobani, Brian. In so many other towns, people just ran away as soon as the militants showed up. They were that intimidated, but not in Kobani.
There are 2 things about Kobani that made this small Kurdish city in Syria the focus of international attention. The first is its location, just across the border from Turkey, which means the world's press has watched and reported as the ISIS onslaught reduced large parts of the city to smoking piles of rubble. The other is the heroic resistance of the people of Kobani. Theirs is a remarkable tale of courage under fire. It's a tale that couldn't be told because, surrounded and cut off from the world, Kobani was too dangerous for reporters to visit. A fact that was not lost on ISIS. In a slickly produced video, they introduced a report from Kobani.
Hello.
Presented by one of their hostages, British photojournalist John Cantley, who'd been forced to become a mouthpiece for his captors. In the video, he mocks reports of an ISIS retreat from parts of the city and the outlets that publish them.
The Western media, and I can't see any of their journalists here in the city of Kobani, have been saying recently that the Islamic State are on the retreat.
Cantley went on to claim that ISIS had control of 90% of the city and was now involved in mop-up operations. We decided to risk a trip into the besieged city to see for ourselves. Let's go. We crossed the no man's land and entered Kobani. What we found was a city demolished but undefeated. ISIS controls no more than 50% of Kobani, and American airstrikes are gradually reducing that area to rubble. Meanwhile, on the free side of the city, Kurdish men and women, outgunned and outnumbered, are not just standing their ground, they're smiling. 34-year-old Azima is a field commander on the southern front, where much of the fighting is happening. She takes us on a dangerous tour of the frontline positions. Now we run, she says. Sheets hung across intersections cloak our movements from enemy snipers. You stay low and run fast. Azima leads us to City Hall. In Kobani now, you never enter a building through the front gate or the front door. She walks us to the council room, describing a recent battle to take the building back from ISIS.
She says there were about 40 ISIS fighters just in these rooms here. So it's not that they're fighting between buildings and across streets, but room to room. And you can see some of the damage. You can see the bullet holes. This was real close quarter fighting.
Azima shows us where the enemy is. Not far. We watch them all the time, she says, and make sure to shoot them before they get too close. Outside, I ask Azima why so many of her fighters are young women. As Kurdish women, she says, we would rather lose our lives than our land or our principles. Those principles are in evidence everywhere in Kobani. These fighters are members of the People's Protection Units. Women and men live together and fight together. There are no formal ranks, no organized units, and everyone calls each other comrade. The Kurds of Kobani are a throwback, progressive idealists in a region that may be descending into medieval darkness.
One way they found to avoid the snipers is by burrowing through buildings, just punching holes in the walls so they can move from place to place without exposing themselves to the open air and exposing themselves to the snipers.
We run up an exposed staircase to an apartment on the top floor of a residential building, where the bedrooms have been turned into snipers' nests. 26-year-old Vian was once a school teacher. Now she spends her days in this room, watching and trying to find the enemy just across the street. Born and raised in Kobani, Vian says leaving was never an option. Kobani is our home, she says. Where else would we go? We will stay here and fight. It's especially important, she says, for women to be strong in the Middle East, where they are rarely seen or heard from. We stand here as symbols of strength, she adds, for all the women of the region.
So you're fighting for Kobani and fighting for women's rights in the Middle East?
Yes, she says, right now I am fighting for Kobani, but I promised myself that wherever a minority is attacked, I will be there to fight for their rights. It's these grand ambitions that have made Kobani such an obsession for ISIS. The fundamentalists consider these people infidels, to be killed or enslaved. Most of the residents of Kobani and the surrounding villages, an estimated 200,000 people, escaped ahead of the ISIS advance, leaving behind their possessions and becoming refugees in nearby Turkey. Only the old, the sick, and the very stubborn still live here.
ISIS propaganda has been saying that there are no civilians left in Kobani, only fighters, and the streets do look pretty empty, but Mahmoud Ali is taking me inside his home to show that there are still civilians here, and his family is among them, and there are plenty of civilians. You can see these children. These are your neighbors, dol jiranek, صح?
The house is crowded, and Ali says no one here is leaving. How could I leave my land and my people, Ali asks. My brothers and neighbors died to protect this place. How can I leave it? Those who remain here rely on a system of mutual assistance for everything. There is only one bakery in town, and the bread is distributed for free all around the city. The few doctors left in town treat the wounded in a makeshift clinic in an abandoned home. Even the weapons are a result of community organizing, like this homemade tank used to ferry fighters to the front lines. ISIS, on the other hand, has state-of-the-art weapons, including tanks and armored vehicles. The only reason Kobani survived this long is because the U.S. is conducting daily airstrikes and helped negotiate reinforcements from Iraqi Kurdistan and from the Free Syrian Army. But ISIS fighters are now dug into their positions in Kobani, and driving them out of an urban area is a challenge. But did it need to be this difficult? Only a few weeks ago, we were watching on a hill in Turkey along with refugees from Kobani who watched horrified as ISIS fighters closed in on the city. The militants made no effort to hide their movements. They were marching in without a care in the world.
These people are extremely frustrated by what's happening here. They see ISIS fighters in their villages, and they say if the Americans really want to bomb ISIS, they're not hard to find.
American officials said publicly at the time that defending Kobani was not a priority.
As horrific as it is to watch in real time what's happening in Kobani, it's also important to remember you have to step back and understand the strategic objective.
With the world's cameras trained on the city, the U.S. was eventually embarrassed into coming to the rescue. The city has now become a key battleground, a test case for the American strategy in the fight against ISIS. Dijwar Havat is a legendary fighter from Kobani. We are very grateful to America for the help it has sent us, he says, but it came very late, and we are going to need a lot more of it. For those who hold the line in Kobani, all this is just a distant echo. To pass the time, Bian sings a song of mourning for her fallen comrades. She knows that Kobani can only be remembered one of two ways, as the site of a heroic victory over ISIS, or as the site of a horrific massacre. Which is why everyone in Kobani, the old and the young, women and men, carries a special bullet around. They call it the bullet of honor and plan to use it to take their own life if the enemy manages to get through the line. Better that, they say, than falling into the hands of ISIS alive.
لا